Welcome to Skin and Soul. I'm Gwenm Carsley, a transformational body, sex, and soul coach, and I'm inviting you on a bold, unfiltered journey into the heart of our humanity through the lens of eros. This is where we strip away the shame, dive into the unspoken, and embrace the wild, raw truth of our desires. Together, we'll crack open the taboo, uncover our deepest intimacies, and awaken the pulse of our sexual essence. Because real transformation, it's messy, it's thrilling, and it's oh so delicious. Buckle up, loves. Skin and Soul Beyond the Pale starts in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Gwenm. I'm your host of Skin and Soul on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm also a body, sex, and soul coach, and I want to welcome you today to Fucking on Repeat, the Aphrodisiac of Opening. All of these topics are very personal to me. I always bring in what's alive. And so this episode could easily be called Bedroom Boredom, but it's also about fucking on repeat in every aspect of your life. So I am going to bring in some juicy tools, but the thread that is going to continue throughout this episode is the thread of presence, of opening and softening. Because as I air this, I'm in London, breaking my own cycle. My nervous system has been on fire, caring for my mother. And I just needed to feel into my own skin, soften in, hear my thoughts, feel my heartache without fearing collapse. And I realize how easy it is to step into a routine, to stop feeling, to let life take over instead of, I've been in Berlin and not being able to integrate the space that I've been living in, forgetting to take responsibility of my own aliveness and my own pleasure, because as I said, it's so easy to get sucked into challenging times in our life. And then we fall into this routine, we fall into mediocrity. And sometimes, and I'm sure you can relate, it's you fall into the maze of the everyday. We fall into story, into survival, into obligation. And that is the food, the fodder of where boredom grows. Because it's not just in the bedroom, it is in your soul, in your being, in your essence. So this episode, Fucking on Repeat, the Aphrodisiac of Opening, is an invitation to start looking at where else am I in my life, am I moving mechanically? And as I bring in these yummy, spicy tools, bringing in presence is where the guts of fire live. It is your source. It is the depth. It is the willingness to step into the unknown. It's about what happens when we just skim the horizon. We miss ocean's depth. It is the casualness of the casualness mistaken for safety. It is the ingratitude of assumption and forgetting to see the other. It's forgetting the awe of the gift of this life. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the anatomy and the architecture of boredom, because it is that sense of moving through the motions. It is the touches that we stop sensing, the kisses that go bypassed. It is touches that go unfelt, bodies making contact without being received. It is thickened skin. It's almost like being calloused, a choreography that feels like obligation. And to this, I would say, I had a beautiful marriage in many ways. I loved my partner. And in terms, losing my voice here. In terms of intimacy, we were going through the motions, and it felt very much like a paint by number. Well into our marriage and our relationship, I could predict where we were going, how the scene would unfold. And so I began to skim the surface. I felt extremely unsatiated. And I know what it feels like to drag on in unsatiation because I've lived it. I've been in that bed. I've been in that body. I have actually been bored in my own orgasm. And I'm going to sheepishly admit here that I have been someone who has waited for it to be over. And the tragedy is this, is that the boredom isn't just living in one partner, in the one that's experiencing the boredom, but it's in the other, the one giving. Even when our minds are rationalizing, the body knows. The body is constantly speaking to us. And it's not about running out of positions, and it's not about finding the right toy or whether you're adventurous enough. And yes, expansion and trying new things and tasting new things and playing, those things can help. Absolutely. They are accoutrements. They are accessories. But boredom is far deeper. It is the slow leak of presence. It is the absence of curiosity. It's what happens when shame sits unspoken for way too long, and when avoidance becomes the third body in the bed. Fucking on repeat is also extremely selfish. It takes without giving. It pulls energy inward instead of meeting what's in front of us or bouncing the energy off. It is the disengagement of our environment, of connecting to others. It is a path of apathy, stagnancy, hollowness. It looks like checking out, scrolling on a phone, going to watch TV for all hours of the night instead of connecting with your person or connecting with yourself. It looks like going from one project to another, keeping yourself overly busy, telling yourself you have no time. It's avoiding intimacy. And as I said, we are wired for growth. So as awful as boredom is, and it can linger there for far too long, it is also a signal of seeking, to start seeking. It's a beacon. It's a lighthouse. Hopefully it stirs restlessness, the ache for something to change. Like numbness, boredom is an absolute beautiful opportunity. It is the antidote to staying stuck, but it isn't about force. It's opening, softening. It's about coming back to the heart, because contraction is natural. The chest can tighten, the belly can pull in, the throat closes. We don't want to talk about what's bothering us. It's uncomfortable. We might get judged. But softening is courageous. It says, I'm willing to stay here. I'm willing to open, even when it hurts, even knowing that the cost could be not being seen in the moment. Because when we close, we are trading aliveness for safety. And we trade awe for efficiency. And the intimacy absolutely goes to the grave. So I know visceral anger that comes from this restlessness. I know the giving up, the sense of hopelessness. Is this all that there is? And I remember at the time not having the tools, dumping and blaming and saying, we rarely make love. And when we do, it looks like this. We're kissing and this happens, right down to the opening of the button, etc. That it felt all the same. And even though we had great sex, then good sex, and even when there were orgasms, they became moderate, more about release than connection. And I was starving for something deeper. But here's the truth, that going through the motions, fucking on repeat is a symptom. And like most symptoms that go unchecked, they become a dis-ease. We wilt, the relationship wilts. And our lives become mirrors of all the places we fuck on repeat. And the consequence, the cost, can look like numbing out with drink, drugs, sex, porn, outsourcing, making constant excuses. It is death to the soul, death to connection, death to your truth and your authenticity. And yet, boredom is not always death. Boredom can be that space. I'm going to call it winter. You know, we can think that we move through these cycles of winter, spring, summer, and fall. And if you think of boredom as being in winter, there is still life growing underneath that ice. There's still a soil being nourished. It's taking its time. It can be for healing. It can be for resting. Where we get stuck is when we don't allow the ice to thaw. When we don't allow spring to soften the edges. So I've said that boredom is winter, which is a very stark image of ice, of not being able to move into aliveness, which we can consider spring or summer. But the truth is that boredom can exist in any season. We can get stuck in anything. We can get stuck in the phase of arousal, always being on that high, but never being quenched in the orgasm, in release, I'm going to say, of the summer, of that ecstasy, that bliss, allowing things to move through us in full expansion. We can also get stuck in that phase of just having one orgasm after another, just being in the ecstatic thrill, being that adventure, thrill-seeking person that is always skimming the surface, but not allowing to go deeper, to step into fall, to feel the integration, to have those moments of post-coital talks, post-sexual chats, the ones that bring you closer. I like this. I didn't. I just need your closeness. I just need time to integrate the sensations in my body, just to feel your breath after the experience. So in the erotic blueprints, Jaya describes 5 states. So you can also think of it as resting, healing, curiosity, adventure, and transformation. And again, it's not that any season or state is better than the other. It's that we can get stuck in anything, that we need to be constantly sloughing off our old skin to be experiencing new versions of ourselves. So boredom shows up anywhere we say, I don't want to rock the boat. This is good enough. And the good enough is where intimacy goes to die, where orgasm becomes efficient, where aliveness is traded for routine. But when we soften back into the heart, we are softening the ice. We are allowing arousal to move into orgasm. We are allowing the orgasm to move into the beautiful integration and digestion and having the leaves fall. We return to presence, because boredom isn't the end. It is absolutely an invitation. But this is also about tools. It's not just theory, it is practice. How you wake up the body again. And I'm going to bring in other elements such as some tools as vibrators and kink and etc. But the foundation of anything is coming back into the body. Breath, sound, movement, feeling into the energetic space and focus, presence. And also with presence comes seeing. And I'm not talking about just looking, I'm talking about seeing, being with. So breath is the first thing that we tend to cut off. We like to hide behind it. We control. It's the signal of disconnection in our body. It's where we are collapsing, where friction stops being felt. So breathe deep, and desire will flood like fire. The next tool is sound. And I don't mean performative sound, but sound cracks open sensation. It is the expression of sensation and feeling and emotion. And not the fake kind, not the one that comes from porn, but the one that escapes naturally, the one that wants to be heard, you know, that gasp, that growl, that cry that you absolutely can't swallow and have been swallowing likely for far too long. Inviting in that the next time you go in for a self-pleasure practice, and I'll talk more about a self-pleasure practice, to let one raw sound escape you. It's not about being pretty. It's not about performing. No one is listening. Make it real, because this amplifies sensation. And again, you know, using breath, everyone's breath will work differently. So it's not about forced breath, heaving, but it is about depth and allowing the current to move through you. So that when sound escapes, you bring your body back to aliveness, which then brings me into touching your body, body mapping. As you explore your body, how many parts of you have not been touched? And so for men, I'm going to invite you, and I'm saying men in specific because the masculine in general has not been taught to do a formal kind of, a more consciously intentioned practice. It's usually about rubbing one off. It's usually about getting through for release rather than absolute depth of pleasure. And so I'm encouraging here a solo practice for everyone to map through the body, all the places that go untouched. Shut the door, create a space for yourself that feels good. Put on music or not so that you can really hear the sounds of your body. You can light a candle. I have this image of being in the bath, but you can be anywhere you want. Feeling the textures of the sheets, if that's where you are, but bringing intention to the practice. So using the tools of breath and sound, and I'm going to also add movement to this. So as you start to feel sensation, how does your body want to move? Because again, this will heighten the sensation and build arousal. And for those, for men, I would say to play with edging, to see where you can go to on a scale of 1 to 10 before literally spilling over or going off the cliff. And it doesn't matter if you do, but just noticing at what level you can go to in intensity before releasing all the way back, maybe down to a level 2, 3, just to raise the arousal again, and trying to do this or working up to doing this 3 to 5 times, because that builds arousal, and the arousal builds energy, which also intensifies the experience, intensifies orgasm, can intensify connection, can intensify length of time. And I don't encourage starting this with a partner. I would do this on my own first. In order to practice, because adding someone else brings on a whole new level of pressure. And so removing that pressure, but playing with those parts of the body that you haven't touched before, and avoiding your genitals for a while. That's the other thing is, can you touch your whole body, avoid your genitals, and find arousal there? Noticing what parts of your body like to be touched and how they like to be touched. Is it just hovering hands? Is it light touch? Is it feathers? Is it deep scratches? Is it smacks? Is it a massage-like feeling? And everything that I'm saying applies to everyone. It's just that I know that men, generally speaking, do not allow themselves a set time, an expanded set time, like a self date that says, I'm devoting this to my pleasure. So a beautiful practice to come together, to bring in deeper connection. And one of my favorites is eye gazing. And many of you may or may not be familiar with it. And what eye gazing is it's not a staring contest. It is sitting across from another, not touching, but being in deep contact with the other. So looking at them in the eyes and not removing the gaze. It doesn't mean you can't ever blink, but it is about not looking away and breaking attention. It is staying focused. It's looking deeper into the essence of the other. And so you'll notice in your body, and I would set a timer, by the way. You can start with 1 minute and work your way up. But you'll start to notice in your body the aliveness, contractions, tingles. It's exciting because all of a sudden you get to feel very exposed and seen, which is arousing, scary, terrifying. All of these things can come up. And noticing as these things do, whether your breath is stopping, where you're locked in your head, where you started thinking about, your to-do list, and bringing your attention back on the other. Bringing yourself back into presence to be with. And that is a practice, but it is also a very bonding experience. And as you get better, you can increase the amount of time and start to also pull yourselves away and notice how long and how far you can go with the connection staying without disconnecting. And I love to bring in film and theater. And there's a great story about it's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Paul Newman, I believe, was the actor, and he starts off in the first scene. He's got his back to the audience, and you can feel the connection of him to the audience. That is full presence. And so the practice is being in your body. You can have absolute 360 awareness. Again, this brings you into presence in your lovemaking. It takes you out of the routine when you can be fully in your body instead of checking out. So even when you're decreasing arousal states, it's to be able to stay in the body and not just go somewhere else in order to come back in, because we feel it. Our partners feel when we're not there. Let's see. There's a lot here, so bear with me. I also want to talk about toys and kink. We are creatures of expansion. And, yes, that can include vibrators, cuffs, blindfolds. And these things can amplify, but they can also distract. And the difference, as I keep coming back to and really hammering it in, is presence. Because kinks isn't just whips and latex. Kink is whatever lies outside of your norm. And for some, kink is turning the lights on. For some, it's making love in another room. And for others, it could be surrendering to rope or sensation play, like feathers, paddles, being smacked. But here's the key, is that pain without arousal is violation. And pain, though in high arousal, can be absolute exquisite bliss. definitely have a conversation around what is off the table, but also allow for the mysterious, right? If you're always talking about everything, and I do think it's important to know what's an absolute no, but if you have the expectation of what's coming next, it's probably not as exciting if it just happens, right? But it does require someone who is very in tune with themselves and with the other. You can't just walk past somebody and smack them. It's probably not going to go very well for you. But in arousal, and if you know that you can play with things, just seeing a reaction. And sometimes it's just being in the shock of being even the receiver and noticing like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And noticing what goes on in the body. Tease and layer. Don't skip tension, because kink isn't just about props. It is about the permission and the allowance within yourself to reveal the parts of you that we keep hidden. The villain, the prey, the goddess and god, the servant, the sovereign, the fool, the silly. When we let those parts breathe within us, we open up to possibility. Which brings me then to another beautiful tool, adventure dates. And I love adventure dates because adventure dates allows for your imagination to come out and play. It requires discipline. And it's also a trade-off so that not one person is just left with the responsibility of taking on the challenge. And so the adventure date is about one person planning the date, not asking for permission, not asking like, what do you think? It's from beginning to end, planning something that you feel would be fun or enticing or sexy, whatever that is. And of course, yes, discussing what is absolutely off the table, and then go. Take on that for yourself and for a commitment back into your relationship. Because adventure is interrupted when we are constantly on autopilot. And it doesn't begin in bed, it begins in the hours before. Because most couples really are drowning in routine. And by nighttime, they're already half asleep. So bringing in the element of adventure, surprise, tension. I'm going to give you just a couple of examples, but really, if you're stuck, you can chat GPT it, which is, you can do your staycation. You can go to a restaurant. And I have not done this, is the blindfolded or the dark restaurant. I'm a foodie, so I talk a lot about food. It could be just, I now I'm lost in but playing with what might excite you, going to a sex shop together, just even to look at the toys. If you're not even ready to buy anything, just seeing what's there, that can be highly exciting. So adventure isn't frivolous. So if you're solo, and if you've ever read the book, The Artist's Way, I would say, that book brought out a lot of things for me, which is take yourself out. What joys do you not permit yourself? If your partner isn't interested in something, doesn't mean that you can't do it. And again, it's not about disconnecting from your partner. It's about nourishing yourself and making yourself so full that you come to the table with who you are. Presumably, hopefully, the person that you're with loves you and adores you for the person that they met and who you are. So when we fall into this kind of murky place where we become the other and we fall into what we think they like and are constantly on the other's schedule, and that goes both ways, by the way, right? Where you see those couples that kind of, they just blend together, they kind of dress together, they talk the same, they almost start to look the same, their pets look like them. So, nourishing yourself, take yourself out on that day, take a walk on the beach, go to the museum, make aliveness your practice. The next one is fantasies, the tool of fantasy. Having the courage to even speak it, that you might have a fantasy. I know so many people that say, I don't have fantasies. And, I think, again, that we think of a fantasy as something extreme, but a fantasy could be, oh, I dream of this person holding me in a certain way. Or I really enjoy a dinner or walks on the beach. That is a fantasy. And so I'm going to invite you to write down 3 fantasies and really try to uncensor yourself. This is yours. And then if you choose, share one if you have a partner. If you don't, speak it out loud to yourself. Allow yourself to relish in it. But if you do have a partner and feel safe enough, knowing that, okay, set the stage. This is about, for the other, anybody who's listening, like allow yourself to sit and listen without judging, without the voice coming in. This isn't about acting on your fantasy. We don't always get what we want. True story. But fantasies are maps, and they reveal our hunger. They expose our wounds. And so every fantasy deserves to be spoken, to be witnessed. It also builds deep, deep intimacy to be able to admit these things to ourselves, because vulnerability is not saying the things that we want to reveal about ourselves. It's the ick. It's the mess. It's often the grossness and coming back and showing our inner guts, like literally open, that makes us so human, that brings us deeper into intimacy, that alivens the relationship again. Which then brings me to mystery. This lost art. Because one of the fastest killers of desire in the bedroom that brings on boredom is casualness. Yes, we long for safety, but too often safety tips then into taking each other for granted. And mystery dies when we get too casual. It dies when the bathroom door never gets closed. Those like letting go of farts and burps and picking our noses or taking out blackheads. When bath time becomes multitask time. When we're scrolling at dinner instead of looking at each other in the eye and having an actual conversation. When our one-on-one time dissolves into complaints or gossip and not into connection. Mystery dies in the tiny habits that we do every day, where we choose not to touch the other, not to kiss the other, or to walk by just with our very present energy. But it also comes alive, and mystery comes alive in our smallest acts of attention. Putting on a yummy cologne that your partner loves, or slipping into a silk robe. Choosing presence instead of dumping your day. Pausing before you speak. Bringing your body first, not just your exhaustion. Mystery doesn't mean withholding yourself, certainly not as punishment. It means tending your fire so that you arrive radiant and unpredictable and able to move into fluidity. It does mean self-nourishment. It's showing up in your full aliveness and not always in your depletion. And yes, I recognize many of us are very depleted. It also, though, means that you're not doing everything together, that you're leaving some conscious space to breathe so that reunion becomes electric again. And mystery is also discipline. We find excuses. I'm too tired, not tonight, right? I have a headache. But still, we're going to drag ourselves to the gym, to the office, to our obligations. So why not bring our discipline into our pleasure? Because at the end of the day, at the pearly gates, nobody's going to give a damn about your discipline of how you went to work every day. So putting your attention on intimacy in the same way that you do with your fitness and your business, in your health. Mystery doesn't need to be elaborate lingerie or elaborate tricks. It is presence and unpredictability. It's not showing up on autopilot. It's daring to be curious. It's staying interesting by living in your full aliveness. And don't always tell and narrate everything you desire. Show it, sound it, move in it, be in it. And so your displeasure can show up in the same way. We know, but show up fully in your body. Let your lover discover you. Change rhythms. Kiss in the middle of chopping onions. Hold hands at the grocery store. Touch while passing. Small shocks of intimacy in ordinary moments. And keep one secret ritual for yourself. And I'm not talking about the secret of cheating. I'm talking about keeping something delicious to yourself, whatever that is. And we used to do that in acting. And what it does is it creates electricity, an energy of electricity in the body. The thing that you won't say, like, oh, I really just want to grab your ass right now. Like, having the thought and never acting on it and just thinking it and keeping that to yourself. Embodying contrast. And this is interesting because we tend to assume that, so authenticity is an absolute. When I say, work in contrast, it means when they're expecting tenderness, bring your hunger. If they're expecting sex, maybe bring more stillness, more closeness, just simple touch. If you are always someone who is doing, what happens when you just stop and slow down? It's interesting because we tend to have parts of ourselves that we don't show automatically, but become fascinating, and they're authentic parts of ourselves. So for me, for instance, I know that I tend to be very alive and electric. But I also know from feedback in work I've done that when I come to stillness, when I am moving more in a grounded way, that becomes more magnetizing, hypnotic, interesting. So playing in the opposites of how you might show yourself to the world, always staying in authenticity. The other one that we tend to forget is repair, make-up sex, coming back together after the disagreement. This is the forgotten aphrodisiac, because we talk about toys and positions, but it is so erotic when we come back into intimacy, when we stand there and say, I couldn't stay for that moment, I misheard, I'm sorry, or I take responsibility and accountability for my part. I can hear you. I can see you now. We tend to come back deeper, fuller, because rupture is always going to happen. It doesn't matter. Avoidance only brings suppression and numbness and boredom. So without repair, things will calcify. And repair is terrifying. It means saying, I shut down, I judged you, all of those things. But it also opens up into further trust. It builds the foundation and the window of tolerance of understanding that we can always come back together. And makeup sex tends to be delicious because all of that tension that had been held can now come together in a beautiful release of explosive release. The body gets to open again. The heart gets to open again when we come back into softening. So a great practice for this is take a moment when you're heightened in your tension, when you're coming into conflict, and pause. Name your truth without blame. So speak it from your I, your experience, your sensations, what you've understood, rather than what you're making me feel. That's a terrible line. You make me feel. Poke, poke, poke. And then when you've expressed it or they've expressed it, mirror it back. Touch before words end. Kiss slowly. Or fuck like you're on fire. Repair isn't therapy. It's remembering that we could have lost this, but we chose not to. Softening is returning back to the heart. And we open by softening the body, by coming in and feeling our contraction and just seeing if we can bring a little bit of space to it. When we feel our unsafety, when we feel our shame, when we feel our tiredness, when we feel like we're giving without receiving. So contraction is natural. It's the body saying, I can't hold on to this right now. So just noticing where you contract in your body, not trying to fix or change, noticing the chest, the belly, the throat, the jaw, and then seeing if you can soften just slightly and breathe there. So I've given you a lot of practices. A personal story before we end today is, there are so many ways that we can approach our sex life. And to say that sex is boring is really discrediting our imagination, because it is endless. It is the source of creation. It is where we birth our art, life, everything that we see around us. So boredom really only happens with disconnection. And in my own life, having played in different arenas and tried, I'm going to say, I've had my adventures and my edging into places that I think people would find pretty racy in some areas and some corners. But what I've come back to is I had a lover many moons ago in my early 20s. And we didn't do anything extraordinary. I mean, when I say didn't do anything extraordinary, I mean, we didn't play in kink. We didn't play particularly like even in sensuality. But what he did bring to the table was presence. And I think I had some of the most incredible orgasmic, connective experiences of my lifetime. And so for all of the adventures I've had in my life, which I'm going to remember the adventure, but I don't necessarily remember the person attached to the adventure or the connection that we had. So it's really about the event itself that has been interesting. But when we come into connection with a person, and, the sensation of being with him has lived with me for, 30 years. It's been ongoing because it was so alive at the time. And we don't forget these things. We forget our most alive moments. And this is the treasure of if you are coupled, and the challenge of bringing this into your life and creating the love story that you desire, the intimacy that you desire. If you are solo, it is the same thing. It is still creating the aliveness, the love story within yourself that you so deserve. So I'm going to leave you with this now. Where in your life are you fucking on repeat? Where are you stuck in the boredom cycle? Where have you let yourself go hollow and stagnant? Where are you numb? Stir into that restlessness. You don't need to have all the answers, but it is the cue to start elbowing outward. All right. Have a beautiful day wherever you are. I will see you next week. And if you ever want to know more, you can always visit my website at gwenmcarsley.com. You can also email me at info@luvology.com. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Skin and Soul with me, Gwenm. Join me Fridays at 10 a.m. PST on Transformation Talk Radio. Catch the podcast anytime on your favorite platforms. You can follow me on Instagram @luvology. Ready to take the next step? Book a compatibility call with me at gwenmcarsley.com.